Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Napa Bookmine this evening. My name is Elena. I'm so excited to see you all here to celebrate the debut book, The Last Nomad, with author Shugri Said Salh. We are so thrilled to have Shugri in conversation with it is St. Helena, right, Holly?
Yes.
Local Holly Hubbard, Preston. Shugri Said Salh was born in the desert of Somalia in 1974 and spent her early years living as a nomad. In 1992, she emigrated to North America after the Civil War broke out in her home country. She attended nursing school at Pacific Union College and graduated with honors. And although this is her first book, Shugri has been storytelling since she could talk. From her grandmother and the nomadic community in which she was raised, she heard stories and learned of their power to entertain, teach, and transform. When she isn't writing or telling stories, she works as an infusion nurse. She lives in Sonoma County with her husband and 3 children. In conversation with Shugri is Holly Hubbard Preston, who was a regular contributor to the New York Times Global Edition for about 15 years and is also now a freelance journalist, essayist, and recently published fiction author. She spent time in East Africa and South Africa, though not Somalia, but has a little bit of experience there. And we are so excited to have her join us this evening. She's worked in radio and in print. She's working on a novel, which we're very excited about. So thank you so much for joining us, Holly. So again, thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and let Holly and Shugri take it away.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's terrific to have you here. And it is, thank you very much to the Napa Bookmine for doing these events. All through the pandemic, they've been doing them and have attracted quite a following. I think you hit 5,000 followers on Instagram, I heard this week. So congratulations, Elena, to you and your crew. And Shugri, it is such a great honor to be able to be in conversation with you this evening. This book came to me prior to release, which was really fun for me. So I was able to see a galley copy of it without acknowledgements and go through. And I really knew very little about it except what was in the front of the book and how, the book jacket cover. And really, it was such a surprise to me. In fact, I've told many people that when I finished it, I felt like I had read something that a modern day Charles Dickens might have written, except, told in real life. The characters that you have are absolutely going to be ingrained in my head forever. The things that happen to you, both, harrowing and really sort of fabulous, and the places you went. There's just was so much range for a book, and you told it in a lot less time than Dickens usually told his. So it's such a pleasure. And it's also, for me, was a chance to really discover Somalia that, speaking for myself, but I think all other Americans, we really just don't know. And it's such an important country. Regionally on the Horn of Africa, it's surrounded by 5, countries that rely on its stability, including Kenya. And, as of 3 weeks ago, we were back, we'll get to it later, doing airstrikes in Somalia. So, there's always much written politically about it, but maybe not so much the tradition, the very rich tradition and culture, and just its ancient history in the timeline of human civilization. So thank you for allowing me to travel to those places. And I hope in our time together tonight, we can explore a little bit about that, because it's such a book about place as much as anything.
Oh, so thank you so much.
It's wonderful to have you. And I think probably to have everyone start and sort of get in the mindset, how would you feel about reading the opening to the book? Because for everyone's benefit, this book is out this week. I've framed my questions with Shugri so that you would have some perspective about her conversation, but not give away her fabulous narrative too much. But I think reading the opener will not give anything away.
Yeah. Before I just read it, I wanted to thank, first of all, to be compared to Charles Dickens is like, whoa, like really. And I want to acknowledge my ancestry, who I am sure today are turning in their grave, that their desert daughter is here with all of you today. You know, that's amazing to them. I want to, to thank you, Holly, Ilana, and Karen, all of you from Napa Book. I wanted to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I want to also say, everyone, please support your local bookstores. That will really go a long way. Okay, so the book I'm going to be reading, I realize I didn't practice and I'm a nervous reader. So please be patient with me and I will try. I can usually see, but when you're nervous and you're over 40, who can see, right?
Even when you're not nervous, over 50.
Yeah, it's like, oh, like, see, maybe I can rock this thing. Who knows, right? Okay, so I'm going to read you the prologue. And it says, I am the last nomad. How can I be the last one? Nomads still exist in that far away desert where I grew up. So how can I make such a bold statement? What I'm really trying to say is I am the last person in my direct line to have once lived like that, and now I feel like the sole keeper of my family stories. As I sit here in my home in California, weaving this tale for you, the weight of that responsibility urges me on. All my ancestors on both sides of my family were nomads. They traveled in the East African desert in search of grazing land for their livestock and the most precious resource of all, water. When they exhausted the land and the clouds disappeared from the horizon, their accumulated ancestral knowledge told them where to move next to find a greener pastures. They loaded their hats and belonging into their most obedient camels and herded their livestock to a new home. My nomadic family was at the mercy of the weather. At the end of July, the long dry season, when the clouds finally rumble with rain, we looked up the sky with renewed hope. As the desert quenched its thirst, the red earth crackled back to life. Responsibility is, adults welcome the rain with drums, singing, dancing. Children get fat and healthy. Sitting around the fire at night, they soak in the folk tales, poems passed down from generations to generation. But despite renewed abundance of food, we knew we had to preserve some of it for the dry season to follow. Sometimes the drought hit harder than usual, killing both livestock and people. Bones, twigs soon litter the train where goats and sheep once happily grazed. In those times, my ancestors ceased singing under the moon. Their drums hardened, and they longed for good news. Children no longer heard stories by the fire, and an old poet will bellow to the desert, voicing his agony. He will speak of a dying land taking his precious camels. His mournful poem will then travel through time across borders to remedy the pain of his people for years to come. My 3 children, raised in California, know nothing of nomadic life except from the stories I have shared. As I sit here now in my comfortable suburban home, listening to my teenager son excitedly tell me about his favorite YouTuber, I am reminded acutely of the void between my past and his present. I speak of a world in which he has little understanding. An old African proverb says, when an elder dies, a library is born. I'm not yet an elder, but I do feel a portal between 2 worlds. I am the last person in my immediate family who holds this particular library of knowledge. As the years pass, the sense of urgency I feel about sharing my experience with my children and the world grows. In my imagination, I have shared my story with each of you many times as we gather under a clear black sky, its shining stars guiding my ancestral wisdom. I have imagined you leaning into me as if I had brought the news of a water after a drought. I have poured us more tea, for I knew it was going to be a long night under a luminous moon. I want to get this tale of mine right. The fire between us has crackled with excitement, as if to notch my story alone. But now it's no longer enough for me to just imagine telling you my story. I feel the need to bring us all to the fire and into my world.
Thank you, Shugri. That was a terrific beginning. And just so everyone is aware, I found this out doing some post-read research that the Somali language was only committed to print, to writing, in 1974, which was actually the year you were born. So it's quite an accomplishment too, to have a woman, Somali, former nomad, be publishing a book in the United States and in written form and so well. So I wanted to make sure and point that out, that
Thank you.
I wasn't aware of that when I read the book, but I found it out afterward.
Mhm.
So you speak there about your son and watching him, you know, with his YouTube and his very American lifestyle, which is very consumer oriented lifestyle. And you as a nomad for the formative years when you were your childhood, I think you were a city girl at 5, and then you were a nomad at age 6 through 9, and then orphaned, which we'll get to, so to speak. But what was the catalyst for you to write this memoir? Was it watching your son grow up? Was it watching what's happening to your country?
There are a few things. Thank you so much. I hope you can all hear me. There are actually few things that was a catalyst to writing. That's for one, like I talked about this wisdom, right? I don't want this wisdom that I have of my country to die with me. Another thing is, seeing my children and knowing that these children are Californian children, and I can see the void between their world and us. And I'm like, and I know they can draw some wisdoms from their ancestors. And I know that, especially for my daughters, you know, they come from a very strong, resilient woman. And I really wanted to show them in times of hard, they can lean on this strong woman. But more than anything, what really urged me on and brought me to really pick up that pen was my mother. My mother was a desert woman, a beautiful woman who was a daughter of a poet, a daughter of a warrior, and who sprang from this beautiful red desert, learning that no one had or have my mother's picture really guided me, and I become undone, you know. So, and really I remember thinking, okay, maybe I remember a guy visiting my mother's house. Maybe he was a white guy. Maybe he has it. Like, I get desperate, and then I thought, okay, it looks like searching for picture is impossible. Like, and even though there was a picture of my father, like, it becomes possible. And it really was like, this is woman who was married to my father for 20 years, who gave birth to 10 children. And like, we're just gonna let her world be gone. And so I went in search of her stories, for I knew nomads, you know, I come from a long line of storytellers, poets, people of riddle, proverbs. I go, surely someone is gonna tell her story to me. And then I start calling people, but there was a new thing around. I grew up with a nation of Sufism. What I really learned is people have changed Somalis have changed from Sufism to Wahhabism. Now, Wahhabism is kind of like strict. It insists on strict interpretation of the Quran or everything. So when I call them and I say, can you tell me? They go, pray for her. Surely she was a good wife. And I'm like, oh no, this is not going to go down this way. So I didn't give up, and I thought it is my job as her daughter to excavate, to dig up like an archaeologist looking for a lost world, that I am going to dig up my mother's story. And in the end, I found my aunt. She was my mother's friend, as well as my father's sister. She was a poet, and she promised to give me the story. But then, within a week of my aunt promising me, she too lost her life. And at that moment, I stopped searching, and I really, grief hit me again. Not only did I lost my mom, but the only woman who have the most insight to my mother is gone. So it was like I'm grieving. But in the end, what comes, I managed to bring her alive in chapter 3 of my book. And I just coupled together interviews I did with my own memory and my older sisters, and what you get is the catalyst to this book.
Well, you definitely brought your mother. It's a very moving chapter, as are the chapter. I mean, there's so many about it, and also the way that your grandmother, which we'll talk about her a little later in the conversation, your Ayo.
Thank you for saying it right. You got it, Holly. You did so well.
She's an extraordinary character, and she is the poet.
She is a poet, yeah.
That Shugri speaks of, and we will hear some of her poetry later on. Mm-hmm. Just for the readers, participants, when you were talking about Sufism, I know that Islam has been in Somalia since the 1100s. So I know that there's a perception once in a while with Americans that is a recent, that sort of more extreme Al-Shabaab, Wahhabism is new. Islam has always been there since the 1100s.
Yeah.
And in your book, you show us, not to go off in that direction, but for those who are interested in knowing a little bit more about that, what happened with the transition from Sufism to Wahhabism, which is from more Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm. You got it.
Version of Sunni Islam.
Mm-hmm.
You do a good job of that in the book without being judgmental or didactic. You do a good job with that. But to go back to your ancestors, you come from poets, you come from storytellers in the oral tradition.
Yes.
And yet you sat down to write a memoir. I'm interested to know, I mean, as somebody who's also finished a book and then rewritten it 5 times in her native language, for you, what were those challenges of writing this memoir, wrapping your head around those words that really weren't your own originally, and a little bit just about your process in approaching this?
Oh boy, let me just say, there was a lot of hurdles, a lot of things to overcome. Like I said, I come from a lot of oral, right, storytelling, right? And I'm a nurse. I don't know if many of you know, I'm a nurse. I rather do a difficult IV than write an essay, right? And I often say, I was the kind of student who you give me a chemistry and math, and I will always score high, and then literally write. I'm like, no, But again, like I have to really reconcile that. Like again, I'm a storyteller. But Holly, let me tell you, go into a rabbit hole. I started this way and go that way. Like, okay, I don't think that was a good idea. Let's come back. Let's rein us back again. And I go this way. Oh my God, talk about compassless desert woman. I got lost all over the place, people. I cry, I break down. I said, Shugri, keep your shit together and get up and get going again. All right, girl. Okay, you're a strong woman. You can do it. And and I did that. But, I don't like to give up things. This was a 6-year process. I am I'm just always one of those person who will stay with it and focus on it. And as it happened to be, I have one of my good friend, Gayla Obamir, is one of those she's just amazing woman who, as a young mother, she actually took me under her wing, and I was like, okay, this is okay. Halloween is coming. This is what we should do. She was that time, I really needed to be mother, even though I was mother, and she's such an amazing human being. And she, her and I both got lost together. It felt like I have my own hurt, and I just started writing, and then we started talking about, but she let me write. But when it comes to edit, we edit it together, we flip it, and then we dump again. And then let me say, this book was, holy, 3 books by the time I was done. And we spent more time editing and doing. And so there are a couple of you, my friend Nal is here. There are a lot of people. Come on, do you want to read? Come on, read it. Look at it. Tell me what it is. You have to leave your ego, your desperate, whatever you have, you got to leave it at the door, and you have to come. And so people were willing to do. And you know what, Holly, I have to believe my own voice. I have a way of speaking and way of writing, but perhaps that ancestor of mine, poetic, they come true in the end. And I must add, I am an avid reader. I read all the time. Mm-hmm. So in the end, that was what helped tame those grammar that was refusing to work together,
I have a question for you before we go to the characters. Some of your characters.
Yeah.
Was there, and this wasn't on the list, so.
Please go ahead.
Was there something in that process, when you check your ego at the door and then you really open up to that process of revision and refinement and also reflection?
Yes.
Are there things in this book that you learned about your country and your experience that you would not have learned had you not written the memoir? Was there something that came to you that you didn't know?
Honestly, even like the language, the language, I took it, I thought by the time I got of age, Somalia literacy went from 5% to 50% due to what Siad Barre did. That's he was a socialist, and really he wants the nomad city people, mothers, everybody. Mothers used to hate going. He made even mothers, grandmothers, everybody go to school. The same thing happened in Ethiopia under Mengistu. But I learned, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know that. I didn't know that the number, the percentage of us that didn't know. I didn't know our language was phonetically translated. It used to be, they used to use other language like Arabic, but the whole language was written that time. What else? I have really learned, there was so much thing. What else can I tell you, Holly? As I can't really think all of it, and I'm sure I'll tell you as I think.
That's a great place to jump to your father.
Yeah.
What you mentioned about the language, because you also, for the participants, you mentioned, I'm going to get his name wrong, Siad Barre.
Siad Barre, yeah.
Siad Barre. Siad Barre. Siad Barre was the authoritarian leader who Somalia fell in 91. He was an autocrat, very complicated man, just like your complicated
that's what, Holly, you got it.
And, he promoted education for women, but he was also a brutal dictator.
Yeah.
And it was in part because of him that you had the anarchy that followed when he was overtaken, and the return of the clan conflict, which we can get to in a bit. But I think about him, and then I think about your father, who is a really interesting character, and I think is worth readers will find interesting, because he was an Islamic teacher, correct?
Scholar, yeah.
23 children, and an autocrat, it sounds too. Pretty brutal, which you get into. But then he's the man who you quote saying, if you educate a son, you educate one person, but if you educate a daughter, you educate the whole community. And you just told all of us how you're a big reader. And then you also mentioned your chemistry and your science background, which, is probably attributable to your father, and fostered that. So here's your father, who I found to be one of the most unlikable and also intriguing.
Likeable too, yeah.
And then likable. Just when you really want to not like him, he will do something when the Civil War hit. And I'm not going to reveal that. But speaking about characters, your father, your grandmother, your mother, some of your sisters, how did you deal with those personas in this story, and how to write authentically, but also
my father, I mean, honestly, it's funny mentioning you say his name. It's just like, he's my father by the end of the day, right? I love him, right? But the thing is, a lot of Somalis or a lot of people, when we write stories, we always don't want to write like what went wrong. But like I said, I really wanted to be honest about things, you know. By the end of the day, there are a lot of more things my father did that I didn't go. So he's actually coming out rather good. But I really wanted to show you, I did not want to kind of paint him certain way and like as if I'm getting revenge on him. One should never write a book to degrade others or to get revenge, because in the end, it's not going to lead nowhere. What I did was, I have to reconcile. My father was a brilliant man. He is a man who spoke with multiple language, who really fiercely wanted his daughters to get an education. He's a man who like in a culture where they favor sons, right? And if they get a scholarship, they give it to the son. My father never did that. My father didn't care for clans. My father never made us live less than, like, if you look at the Somali culture, Holly, believe me, when I say to you, I didn't actually grow up under that kind of setting, but most of Somali girls are catering to their fathers, to their brothers. They're doing his laundries, they're cleaning, they're serving. Even recently, a young girl visited me about three weeks ago. She came with a friend, and we were talking. I said, "Hey, how are you?" And she was telling me like, "Oh, you know, my big brother is alive. He's here too, and I'm here." And she just went on how she's doing his laundry. Do you see? So I'm glad my father did not take us to that world and did not make us live. But the reason is that I wanted to be honest when he crossed the line is because that is to show you he was a complex human being, just like many of us, right? The good and the bad and the ugly lives in us. And believe it or not, my brother tried to tell, he didn't want me to write that truth. He even didn't want me to write the simple truth that my father wanted to steal money from his mom, because he wanted to get an education. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with that? He's stealing the money to leave the desert so he can get an education. But I'm like, this is what it is like to live with Somali men as well too. It's like they have this ego that he thinks he can still control me and tell me what to do. And I'm like, yeah, you don't get to choose this when I am going to speak my voice. And thank God we are in America, no one can. So my father, I loved him. He was a very complex, and he educated his daughters. He made us equal to his sons. I never felt under his leadership that I was, under his fatherhood, that I was less than. So if you really think about that, then he did well. Maybe I don't appreciate how he went about it, but I do have love for him. I really do. And I'm not a kind of person who holds on to that pain. I understand that he was a man of his era.
Well, and I think that's what I really appreciated about your book, is that we begin to understand your family members against the backdrop of an era and of a century and of a way of life, and doing what they were brought up. And in that way, he did have certain progressive components. And I want to just to clarify, I use the word teacher. Her father was, Shugri's father was a prominent Islamic scholar.
Mm-hmm.
And he
was a teacher as well.
He was a teacher as well, but he was also a prominent Islamic scholar, highly educated, city raised, whereas your mother was nomadic, had a nomadic
initially.
tradition.
initially, remember, he left that world behind as well. Like I said, this was the reason his own mother, who was a nomad, was kind of didn't want to give up her son to the city, right? It was an unknown galaxy, and he would have been her camel herder. So so it was hard to give, yeah. But you're right, Holly.
I think it's good to speak about when you mention women and the sort of the way females have been historically treated and represented in your culture, and we'll talk about it more broadly for next. But maybe let's just first speak about your grandmother, who is a really extraordinary character. And I wonder what she would think if she knew that the first woman was running for president in the October 10th indirect elections in Somalia. Fazia Yusuf Adam, she goes by Adam, but
okay. So it's not Fatima Daib, huh?
No, Fazia Yusuf Adam. She was a former foreign minister.
Really?
But she is running for president. She's the first woman to run.
It's good to hear that. My friend ran before. I guess I need a software update here. Yeah. But yeah.
She still will be decided by clan elders, that vote for the president. But I wonder what your grandmother would think here.
I think, my grandmother was not a woman who lets men control her. She, like you said, she was a poet. And if you're asking me I think my grandmother would probably be very happy, really, right? But she was a desert woman. Excuse me, I think my son may be coming back, and God knows, hopefully he doesn't say, Mama! I can hear the door opening. Sammy? Okay, thank you. Sorry, I lost my thought.
So anyways, let's talk about your grandmother a bit. Okay. She was the one who took you out into, you were in the plateau area, correct? I was looking at the map of Somalia, and I know that the nomads ranged really all over the country without a compass.
Yeah, they did. Oh my God. These people knew how to walk around. Yeah. So my grandmother, we can go back. I have a story for you, but that story maybe we're going to do later. But let's just go a little bit. Like I said, my grandmother was a nomad. She was a poet. She was, as a child, she told stories to me, She was a kind of woman like who will create, if she doesn't like her husband, she'll create a complicated, intricate cerebellum poem to insult him while he's sitting right there, and he wouldn't know if she's insulting him. And in fact, my grandmother, when she lost my grandfather, who passed away actually while my grandmother was pregnant with my mother. So my mother really never met her father. She had to be. They did something called dumal. Dumal is the act of marrying your brother is. I don't know if it's in the book, but your brother is your husband is brother. That is after she lost her husband. She was forced to marry her husband's brother, right? And I don't think she liked this guy. From what I heard, he was a bit stingy, and she just went ahead and created this complicated poem and literally insulted him, how stingy he was. And there was a time she was also coming from, what was she doing? Yeah. I don't know if you guys know, in nomads, we're always in search, like I said in the reading, in search of water, in search of grazing land. And Dan is an act of fetching water every 4 days using a camel, right? A male camel to carry your vessels. And then you go into the well or reservoir and you get your water. In one of those times, she come upon a well that belonged to her sub clan, but they did not like that she had children within their sub clan, but it fails after it becomes another. Think of Somali, clans like this. There are 4 main clans. They keep branching off and branching off. And think of this as a warring squirrels. They don't always get along. Clans can turn to each other. So she asked guy if she can get a water. And he said, no way. And he started insulting her. And so she created this poem for his newly bride. This was an old man who just married this young girl. And she created this intricate, very scribbler poem and told the young wife, this is no good. Just leave him, you know? And I was like, wow, like that was my grandmother. Like she was a camel tamer. There was I thought all women tame camel. No, was specific to my grandmother. Camel herding is for men. But my grandmother, as a child, I saw her herding her camels. So there was a lot of things she was already socially defining. And honestly, like, if she didn't like a man, she left him. If she didn't like a clan, she insulted them. So, you know, as I talk about in the book, she stopped insulting other clans when she tragically lost one of my uncle and lost in one of those drought in 1974. She lost another daughter who was kind of had a developmental issue as a result of another woman trying to steal that child. As you will read in the book, you'll know. Yeah, I hope I answered all your questions.
Well, I will say, just for everyone listening, that there's a wonderful story. We won't get into it, but about you as a young girl being responsible for a camel with a lot of water that had to get back to your encampment. And you were alone. I just want everyone to imagine, how old were you?
Yeah, so this story, I know exactly what you're talking about, Holly. Yeah. This story actually went forward. So this is time I live in the city. I have forgotten the
sent back.
Yeah, nomadic.
But because you knew how to do it, you had to get a camel through the night with the wildlife by yourself. I don't know many of us on this.
Oh, it was it was scary. And I have softened up from years of living in the city. And that night, you know, I thought, you know, I'm going to die being brave because as you remember, the very camel I was leading was bitten by a hyena. And they said the minute he hears the hyena's sound, he becomes undone on me. And what happened is, you will read in the book, like a lot of crazy things happen.
I just bring it up because you are an infusion nurse and a mother of 3, but you're also been a camel and a goat herder.
Oh, yeah.
But back to your grandmother. I thought just a short few sentences for us to be able to actually hear that poetic language. And then I have a more challenging question for that.
Okay. So in this poem, if I set the scene for you, okay? I'm gonna try to set the scene for you because I want to really you to understand. Holly, do you have the time? It's not gonna take long.
Okay, we're at 7:43.
Okay, thank you so much. So if I set the scene for you, think of this desert. The desert is people are a nomad. They move in search of water. They and grassy land, and think of a youngsters like they were not on YouTube on a cell phone, but if they want to mingle. After they herded their animal, whether that is a goat, camel, sheep, or cows, they all, as the nightfall, they head home and they sit, you know, like they fence the animal, they milk the animal, they fence the animal. After that, it was like, we're a teenager, let's be bad, right? And the desert, in those times, what they did is they just like run into the desert, they gather under the moon, like not around where they were, but they know where to meet, right? So think of these youngsters meeting there and all full of testosterone hormones, trying to show each other by dissing each other, by insulting each other's clans, by testing each other, their cerebral knowledge, like everything. So my grandmother, obviously in this time, was not really old enough to join the big girls. So this all boy and girls, you know, and she's not supposed to be in this poetry slums, you know, and you know how in rap people are kind of throwing things with lines at each other and you have to return and defend. So, but she learned that her sub-clan, the girls from her sub-clan lost the poetry contest and she was indignant. And so she went. She's 12 years old. This is the poem that I learned, Holly. So when you ask me that question, I look for it, and this is what I learned. I did not know this about my grandmother. When this poem that would make her famous when she uttered. Now think about it. I want to also tell you guys that when you are doing this poetry, it's not like you're writing down. No. You have to be like quick and witty and fire back. And then all of these people around you, this youngsters, the boy, they have to commit it to memory. And thousands or whatever, 400 years, 100 generations back, they have to utter it back or recite it back. So these people, Somali poetry and poems are just, we're called the nations of poems, so we can get very. So my grandmother gets indignant, and she snuck with the big girls, and she showed up there. And this is how she knows she come from her mother come from a major clan called Macherten. Now in this book, I went out of my way to stay about the clan thing, business, because I don't believe in this thing anymore. And if the clan is being used, I rather it used like the way it was when it's used to, this is your name and this is your clan. So my grandmother went, and right away she give herself, she's talking in the third person first, and she give herself an artist name, right? My grandmother is Halima Hersibula, but she calls herself Hadi Hogo Herdale. It's a very tongue twisting. And she is speaking in the third person. So she knows that she's about to insult a sub-clan of Macherten, very small sub-clan. But she also knows her mother come from a major clan of Macherten. So she is like, Mama, I want to apologize to you. Because she knows this is going to go down in history. So she apologized her mother's sub-clan. So I'm not going to relate. In the first stanza, she uses apologizing her sub-clan. The second stanza of the poem, she is telling the girl is like something. I think she said, and the third stanza, she started insulting other people's clan. So we're not going to do that one, but I wanted to read this for you, okay? So you can hear it. And I must remind you, this is like my grandmother, like I'm reading her poetry, and I have like good understanding of poetry. And I'm thinking, she uttered this at 12, I'm lost. So she's like, she really is, she's just amazing. So she said, Maqawir reer abtow, maqaaluhu yu ku dhibin, Macherten gaabsadan muraadaysan hayay. So she's saying, Maqawil Hubbard, she goes, my reer abti, my mother is kinship, or she said, make sure hearing this doesn't bother you. I'm just picking on this little Macherten. So please stand down, she tells me. Ummadanad going wayayo, mag auspan kullaray. In the second stand, she said, now this is the stand where she's saying, she's taking that persona of Hadiya Hoga Hurdale, and she's speaking in the third person, and she's saying, I'm going to read it to you and translate it for you. Hadiya Hoga Hurdale, Ada Dalated Dawak, Gabdi Doctor Dawak, Sokoya Kumaglet Dawak, or Hadiya Hoga Hurdale. Let's see what she said. haddii malagaagu galay, haddii lagu soo milmilay, haddii lagu maagan yahay, haddaan lagu mahadinayn, haddii xooga herdhalay. So she is just witty with her language, and I'm so impressed with this young grandma of me. I'm just like, wow. So in this poem, it starts, she's just saying, you haddii xooga herdhalay, adaa dhalatee dhawaaq, you the noble one, so bellow, she's saying. Gabdi adopted the work. So she said, you brought all these girls together, all these youngsters. So go ahead and bellow now. So the work. And she's saying, so the kinship or your king can hear you. So I'll go ahead and bellow. Again, I must admit that I'm doing disservice to this translation because my brother who passed away, who I love, he's my amazing brother, is the one who translated all the Somali proverbs, and he would have been the one for this kind of job. But like I
It's a
said,
treat. It's a treat for us to hear it, because I will tell all the participants in the beginning of every chapter there is a Somali proverb, and it's translated, but I just felt this desire all the way through it to hear the language.
yeah,
Something else that I thought about throughout this, and I know we're going to get to questions here very quickly, but I think particularly for female readers of this book, the female perspective, the experience of a Somali woman is an important thread that's woven through this whole story. And it's too big a conversation to deal with in 30 seconds, where you do cover, I think you handled it really well, the whole issue of female genital mutilation. And, you know, your own experience, your sisters, you explained it, you put it in cultural context, which was very interesting to see in a way I hadn't seen it.
mhm,
And then, you know, I was able to watch you sort of grow up with it through the memoir.
mhm,
You know,
yeah,
from the
that is
time you
true.
had it done at 7,
Nice.
and, you know, and wanted it because it was something culturally that girls aspired to.
Mhm.
And then when you later were married and in the United States, and again, I won't cover that ground because it's covered in the book so well.
Mhm.
But I did wonder when, you know, I read that, you know, again, Somalia is having its first female president run for election. It
Mhm.
also has its first girls soccer team now, women's soccer team, the Golden Girls, who are competing nationally for the
That's
first time.
amazing.
They
Yeah,
tried to do it in 94 and they started a few years ago. So
yeah.
there are these developments that are happening for women. And I wonder, you know, your grandmother was also a proponent of
Mhm.
maintaining that cultural tradition.
Mhm, mhm.
And I'm wondering at the end of this book, readers, you know, what do they do with that? How do you think that is something that will eventually stop? You know, or is it just so ingrained in that society?
I am hopeful, Holly. I'm really, really, really hopeful. For for the reason being, first of all, Somali women, have when I live in now in Western culture, and I have Somali friends, and I see all kind of, you know, about Somali women, what they go through. Like, even I often say, even our Me Too movement is extreme. You know, it's like, you know, a Somali woman are the most resilient, you know, being that I ever met. I honestly, I'm at sometimes I go, I don't even think some of the things this woman is get through that I can get through now. I'm like just amazed by them, really.
Mhm.
And so they are fighters, and they are always fighting. So for that, I am hopeful. However, you know, this female circumcision is deeply ingrained in the culture, and and even if people wanted to, like, it will take time to
Mhm.
come and that to get that world undo, you know, or to let it die off. And perhaps maybe the answer will be using religion, maybe, because the reason I say that is I know in the religion it doesn't say people, woman, female has to be circumcised. That's extreme, you know. So perhaps maybe that is in Somalia, they will probably maybe, because of the religion, if you come from that route, there is a possibility it can unravel for better. That's me being honest. Another thing, Holly, is when I was writing this book, I know a lot of people wrote about female circumcision, but it was always shrouded with their own pain, with their own victimness, all of that. What I really wanted to show you was the grooming, that how does one get here? The idea behind what make us do this thing? How did we get here, right? And as you read in the book, I told you it started with shaming a little girl. Like if they see little girls private showing, like somebody will launch some kind of object at you or like try to burn you. I'm like, oh. You know, it was like, and then it was the role of like your whole virginity is tied. If you're not virgin, you are bringing shame to this all this men who their social standings tied to you. Then there is this thing where, when this is drought, the desert is drought, it's harsh, it's tough. So what would this, and our clans are constantly at war with each other.
Right.
We're at war with each other and continue to be at war with each other even today. So a way to create alliance was to give each other a virgin daughters. And if you don't deliver that virgin daughters, well, that was disastrous for you. For one, you don't get peace, which means you don't get to drink from certain wells, which means you don't get to have certain grazing land. So survival was dependent on it. So that meant your daughters, the daughter you're about to give, better be a virgin, and she's better be sealed, and she, you know what I mean? Like, so you can see all of this craziness tied to it. And so I come of age from that culture. As I said in the book, my mother was the one who's supposed to carry out this tradition, but her life was cut short and it fall to my grandmother. And I remember my grandmother being sad because she just had lost my mother just 2 or 3 months ago. And then she has to do this for us. And I knew she was doing this because she knew, had she not done that, we will not find anybody to marry us. We will be ostracized. And when you're in a schoolyard, literally, little girls will shame you, ridicule you, and ask you, you're not circumcised, and you better say, no, I'm circumcised. And then you run into a corner and you flash your private at them. Okay, what about you? Like, so I wanted to take you to that world, right? To what it's like to be groomed. And then I told you how I volunteered to go first and how I was brave. Of course, because I grew up under the shadow of this poetic, a woman who literally chased lions into their hole. So I have to be, and I just observed her, and I was one of those kids who mimicked that, who embodied my grandmother, And so I just went for it. And I also described my sister who was terrified. I just wanted to show you the thinking behind it. And I am not it happened, what happened. It's not like today I go, oh my God, that happened. Holly, every woman I knew went through that.
Yeah.
It was
no, and I think you did an excellent job, all those things. And I want to just see quickly if there are some questions. Do we have anybody that wants to unmute?
Yeah, we don't have anybody in the chat yet, so feel free if anybody wants to unmute themselves, ask a question, and join the discussion, please feel free to do so now. It always takes a few seconds for somebody to get brave enough to be the first.
Or you can type it in the chat.
Yes.
No, I thought you did a great job. Do we have a question or? Okay. I thought you did a great job with.
And we can let people jump in if they twitch.
Yeah,
honestly,
no,
I know how nervous people can be. I too feel like,
Well,
see,
you did.
Debbie has a hand raised.
Do we have a hand raised?
Yeah, Debbie. Debbie, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I know Debbie. She's lovely.
Hello. Congratulations, Shugri.
Oh, Debbie,
you deserve it.
You. Oh,
all the glory to you. And thank you for making this a forum.
yeah.
Napa, really representing and giving us some really good material to work with.
Thank you.
I work in children's mental health. I also work with women who have had DV in their background, and this story is not uncommon. And to have you write this book from your perspective is to give give credence to the fact that this is still continuing in societies.
That's
and
scary.
to actually have this be available to us now to pretty get a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
Of how I was just letting my dogs out. So I'm just really grateful that you did it. And then I want to also piggyback up on what you said regarding, I think it was your grandmother who had to marry her husband's brother?
Yeah, that was Debbie a way to keep the wealth and not to introduce a new man into their life. Like in their mind, they were thinking like it's safe for the family. We don't have to bring in somebody who will, like, for God's sake, molest the children, and then we want to keep these camels and goats all into, yeah.
That's very familiar to also some of the other ancient religions as well,
Yeah.
that they do the same thing. I know that to be true in the
Mhm.
Jewish tradition. If somebody passes, and especially Orthodoxy,
Mhm.
I mean, I have relatives who are Orthodox, and
Mhm.
so I know that to be true, that that happens as well. And so you know, you can kind of say that some of the similarities in religion go cross culturally.
That is
And
true. Mhm.
yeah, so I'm really glad that you wrote the book. I'm happy for you, and
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you,
excited.
Debbie.
Fine.
Thank you for
Thank you.
calling in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
No, we're hitting 8 o'clock here, and I don't know if there are any other questions. I would say that this book is really, yes, I mean, what Debbie was saying about religion. With Shugri, we have her story, we have climate, we have clans, which, you know, Shugri says she doesn't want to get into it with good reason, because the clan system is sort of been at the basis of all the civil and the civil, at least, strife over the last 30 years. And
Yeah.
it's worth, if you read the book, going to have a look at a little bit about the clan system. Climate, you made me think even more broadly about climate and water. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This book is just out now through the Napa Bookmine. And there is so much more to talk about with it, but really, I think it's a good stopping point, because how you get from Somalia to Kenya and Canada and then Sonoma, that in itself,
Yeah.
we're just, you really are a true nomad.
I am a true nomad. It's and as you know, Holly, my whole life always keep changing. Always something will happen, and then would happen, and then it will change. So honestly, I'm like, I sometimes go, how, like I was saying in the book, like, when I'm driving, like, how did I end up here? Like, one thing my mother gave me to her nomadic nomadic mother as a gift of labor. I was the spare daughter. I was the one who was not gonna sacrifice, but that meant I wasn't gonna grow up with the rest of my sibling. I wasn't gonna get an education, and and the desert, God knows if I'm gonna be even here. What about the lions, the hyenas? I mean, it's just the survival of the fittest. And but now I'm here. Like, I don't know. One thing I would say is that I felt always the world work, like how some people say the world works against them. I always feel like it works for me, like toward helping me. And I am really indeed very lucky, blessed, and there could have been so many crazy things, but it didn't happen. And I really wanna, and Holly and everyone here, tell you guys that this is, I believe, stories have ways of really connecting us, reining us into our shared humanity, reminding us who we are, taking you on somebody's shoes, and then go, oh my God, I did not know. Now I know why they do that. Now I know why, all of that. And this book literally is one of a kind, because it's not even common that somebody who has an educated father grows up in the desert. Majority of the girls who are my age, who their father was educated and was living in the city and their mother was there, they never have to go back to the desert. But thanks to my mom, whether that's good or bad, I end up vacillating between those two worlds. And I'm glad I did, because then I was able to excavate, dig those worlds for you, and then put it and weave my tale for you. And I'm very
glad.
happy about that.
I thank you for it. And I think at a time when many of us are feeling anxious about the climate,
Yeah.
anxious about the clanism that is in this country.
Yeah, we have
your
our own
book, but in
travels.
your book, you can see where it can be useful in the desert and where it's not useful. But at a time, there were many things, if you bring your imagination to the book as a reader, and it also gave me a lot of hope, your story about our own adaptability, you know,
Yeah.
here in California. So it may seem like a far away place, but when I finished the book, I didn't feel that way. And I thank you so much.
Thank you
so much for your
Yeah.
hour with us today. And I am hoping that this is the first of many, or actually you've had a few book talks and been on NPR San Francisco
Yeah.
affiliate. So
Yeah.
we're lucky to have you.
No,
And
thank you.
I wish you the best of luck. Any more books, or is this your?
I will continue. It feels now, you know, this portal is open, and I'm working on. There's a question I really want to answer. There are a couple of things I'm working. I am halfway done with Arawella. It's a young nomadic girl who's a warrior spirit. My agent and I are thinking about. She was asking something about a picture book for a younger one, and then there is a chapter book I start. Not a chapter book, but a whole book. But it's like more like an essay. I really wanted to debunk something, because there's this thing that female Somali women went to had female circumcision done to it, and then therefore our feelings and everything, our intimacy, we are done, women. And I wanted to debunk that, because I interviewed some woman who like told me something that even blew my own mind when it comes to their sexuality, or whether they have feelings. I ask questions that like that. Am I turning purple here, guys? Like, can you see my cheeks? Like, really? Like, and so you know, I'm very excited. I feel like there's a competition between the nurse in me and the writer in me now. So,
Well, we look forward to reading more from Shugri Said Salh. Elena, you have any last words for us?
We do have one last question from Nellie, who I think will see us off. I want to make sure she gets a chance to ask. Go ahead and unmute, Nellie. You can
I also say quickly that please don't forget, it's a tough time. I want everybody to get their book from Napa book. You know, we are all here, so let's all support our local bookstore.
You have one question before we go. More. Nellie?
Go ahead, Nellie.
Hi. That's my girl, guys. Hi, Nellie.
So kind of a question, I'll finish with a question, but a comment or two first, and that is touching on what Debbie said about marrying brothers in cultures, and that's also used to be common in the Irish culture as well, so I'll put that there.
Yeah, I knew it. You see, like when we all have, even like giving each other daughters, like cultures have done here long ago, like England, maybe France, you know, they used to exchange daughters to kind of create that alliance. So I think,
so, and I also wanted to say to the people here that do not already absolutely know Shugri, is that she is even better than the person that she appears to be tonight. She's a good friend of mine, and that I don't see enough, and I'm going to get choked up, but I'm so honored to be to see this happen to you. This is amazing, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much, Nellie. Oh my God, we're both gonna cry now.
But before that, I do actually have a question that will get you thinking, and that is, how do you feel that the stories in this book, because it's my understanding that your girls there are a lot of them that your girls hadn't heard until, you know, at least until maybe a year or two ago when we had a conversation about it. When your oldest was talking to a Somali man and you were very nervous. My question is, have they read the book, and do you feel that that it's had any impact on kind of the way they look at your culture and the world, and I mean any way that you think it's impacted them, and your son as well, but I mean, you know.
Which my son, your son is your best friend. Thank you, Nellie. That's actually a really good question. Yeah, my daughter actually, Ayan, my oldest, finished it, and she called me today, and she had a hard time initially finishing. She will read and then stop and read and stop. because my children has such a love for their their she didn't grow up with my mom, she didn't grow up with my grandmother, so they had such a deep love for it. And yes, so she really have a hard time, but in the end I feel like she gained resilience from it, and she's better off for it. And my son even didn't know. He heard me talking about the female circumcision. What are you talking about? You mean that happened to you? Well, I'm like, yes, Sammy. Like, the female circumcision didn't make no sense. Yeah, so they are very, 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 grateful that I wrote, and they are more anchored to that world, So I'm very glad about that. Thank you so much, Nellie.
Thank you. What a wonderful thing to end on. I am so appreciative of Shugri for taking the time to be with us this evening, for Holly for all the work you put into this incredible conversation. Really, the book is really an unbelievable read. It's so simply told, and it just pulls you right through, and I learned so much and really enjoyed it. So I hope everyone will pick it up. If not from us, then from your other local independent bookstore.
Yeah.
Support your local authors as well. Shugri is just in Sonoma. We love our Sonoma and Napa authors. And what a touching evening this has been. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shugri.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, all of you. Wow.
Thanks for staying on a few extra minutes, everyone. We appreciate it.
No worries. Thank
you. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and Nellie and everybody with the comments in the chat. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good
Bye,
night.
Amanda.